It's a Japanese term short for pocket monster.
That's all they're wanting now is pure Pokemon. We haven't sold any yo-yos or Star Wars merchandise in a long time.
It's 1999, maybe early 2000. Pokemon is everywhere. The cards, the TV show, the elementary school playground is dominated by the franchise. And, of course, you gotta talk about the Game Boy games.
Where can you catch all 150 Pokemon? On your Game Boy, that's where.
Pokemon Red and Blue were probably many kids' first video games ever, to be honest. And I also remember only playing Super Mario Land before that. So the hype was indescribable. And honestly, it's a great first game to play. It's easy enough for kids to play and understand, but it's also complex enough so that you will probably need help figuring out where to go next, or how to catch a rare Pokemon here and there. And the hype really benefited from that. Someone trading you that version exclusive you can't get otherwise. Someone else telling you how to find the Surf HM. Or remember that one kid really insisting that they found Mew under a truck near the cruise ship. Wait, what was the last one? If you click this video, you probably at least have a vague idea of what I'm talking about already. Or I might have just unlocked a buried memory for you. Maybe you were one of the kids who went out of their way to see the truck. That weirdly placed, suspiciously different object just off the dock in Vermilion City. But the rumors spread the way those kinds of rumors usually do. Not through any proof or evidence, or through anyone actually having done it, but through the sheer confidence of whoever was telling the story. Someone's older brother did it. Maybe they were one of the suspiciously many kids whose uncle worked at Nintendo. In any case, if you were like 7-year-old me, you went home and you tried it out. Or you filed it away as probably fake, but definitely worth checking out eventually. Now, of course, Mew under the truck isn't the only one of these playground rumors about games. It's also neither the first nor the last. There's a whole genre of this, basically. Especially since the internet became more widespread. The video game urban legend, so to speak. The thing that someone swore was real, that spread across schoolyards and internet forums and gaming magazines before anyone could verify it. And sometimes even long after people have actively debunked it. If you grew up on Minecraft, you probably know this character. Or maybe you know this one way before that. Whatever your myth of choice is, this seems to be a somewhat common thing. A pattern in human behavior that keeps repeating across decades, across platforms, spanning wildly different games and wildly different audiences. Something about the way we interact with digital worlds keeps producing the same result. A rumor built around something that isn't there. Which brings me back to Mew and that truck. Because here's why I decided to talk about this today. Because I never really believed any of the rumors those weird kids told me. But also, I went home and checked anyway, just in case. And if you look around the internet, people are still checking today. Because something happened here, right? Something like culturally. Why do we check the truck when we don't actually believe there's anything there? Or is there something there after all? Let's find out.
So your kids are using words like Pikachu and Squirtle and Bulbasaur, and you haven't got a clue what they're talking about.
Alright, so what is actually under the truck? Nothing. There's nothing there. Alright, but I am serious that there is literally nothing there. But I mean, we already knew that, right? That's kind of the premise of the whole video. But maybe I'm asking the wrong question here. Because it would honestly be really boring if the rumor just turned out to be true, and that's it. The more interesting question would be, why did this rumor exist in the first place? Why was it so widespread that it basically existed worldwide? Why Mew? Why the truck? Let's investigate.
It's the Nintendo game that originated in Japan and has American children going crazy over the game itself.
If you lived through Pokémania, the number 150 should be burned into your brain by now.
150?
So 150.
150 wasn't just a number of creatures in the games, it was the goal, a checklist. Say what you will about the over-the-top 90s marketing.
My nephew, Ash, he just turned 10. His dream is to become a Pokemon master.
But someone really knew what they were doing. You definitely knew there were 150. And you knew that you gotta catch them all.
Capture all of these little Pokemon things. And they're pretty tricky.
But there was something more interesting here. Because something didn't quite add up from the very beginning. Because if there's 150, then who is this? And who is that? And who the hell is this man? So ultimately, you know what was even more exciting than 150? 151.
I know there are 150 Pokemon out there, but is there really one more?
So what's a Mew? Chances are you either already know or you don't care about too many details, so let me just skip to the part that's relevant to this essay. As the legend goes, one of the programmers of the original Pokemon games, Red and Green, basically snuck in an additional creature into the games because there was some space left after removing some debugging tools. Nobody stopped him because nobody really noticed. Since there's no encounter data for this creature, technically nobody would know of this or ever see it. It would just be like a little in-joke or like a ghost in the machine. As a side note, I have no idea if any of this is true, but that's the story that keeps popping up in interviews and articles. But there's also something almost too perfectly mythological about it, if you know what I mean. Like if you were to tell the origin story of a secret monster that was hidden in the code but escaped into the full game and into the real world, metaphorically speaking, like this would be a pretty good story to tell. Now, the old games were kind of a mess programming-wise in many regards, and glitches and data corruption do happen. Alright, so we walked 500 steps, and here we are. We're teleported back here, and now we will be in this mess. Also, there's devices like the Game Shark that let players modify their saves, so it's probably fair to assume that some people, on a small scale at least, noticed something in the code and started spreading rumors about the existence of a secret Pokemon. But Mew wasn't kept secret for too long anyway. In Japan, even before Western releases, CoroCoro, a magazine that was essential for Pokemon coverage at the time, ran features on Mew as early as 1996. The magazine also hosted a contest for players to send in cartridges for the chance to have Game Freak staff manually add Mew to the player's party. But with apparently only 20 winners, and therefore only a maximum of 20 creatures legitimately existing out there in the wild, to the average person, what this new Pokemon exactly was, or what it could do, would still be a mystery. With the Pokemon brand expanding, and especially with the Pokemon anime beginning in 1997, and hinting at Mew early on, for example, literally in the opening, as well as Mew appearing in the first chapter of the Pokemon Adventures manga, also 1997, its existence itself no longer had been a secret. There were also additional limited distribution events, official Nintendo promotions where you could bring your Game Boy cartridge and have Mew transferred directly onto it, in person, by appointment, in Japan, for a limited number of players. So for Western players, this was still basically mythology, but in Japan it became semi-established. As a Westerner, you couldn't really attend. You probably couldn't even read the magazines. What you had was the rumor of a rumor, basically. You knew Mew existed. You saw a Japanese screenshot in some magazine. Mew was real, obtainable, confirmed by official sources. It just wasn't obtainable by you. It's real, but you can't have it. So what we learn from this story is that Mew was just a weird lucky accident that somehow became a huge thing.
But Ben, Mew is mentioned in the Cinnabar Island Pokemon Mansion journals by name. Also, why would there be a Mewtwo without a Mew?
Wait, actually, that's a really good point. But it was such a clean legend.
全部で150種類。通信ケーブルでモンスター取り替えっこ。
Alright, so let's talk about what's actually in the games. Because there's really 3 ideas that we have to keep track of. Mew as lore, Mew as a character, and Mew as something you can actually use in the games. And if we assume that we cannot get Mew on our team through normal means, and there's no Mew actually appearing as an NPC, that leaves lore. If you're unaware, something about the first Pokemon games you have to know is there's actually not that much lore. Don't get me wrong, you have a general story, several characters you meet, and so on. The Team Rocket plotline is probably the most fleshed out we get with actual text. But you're a silent protagonist, and aside from battle dialogue, there's really not that much going on. Aside from the individual Pokédex entries, which, to be fair, are a lot, almost none of these little guys are ever even mentioned. World building is there, but it's mostly passive, and a lot is just implied. That is, until you reach Cinnabar Island, where, really in contrast to everything else in the game, you can find comparatively detailed journals laying out the backstory of the game's hidden final boss and creature 150, Mewtwo, and by extension, the creature it was created from, Mew. So why is this here? I don't know. But what I do know is that while a lot of world building is indirect, Pokemon Red and Green are dealing with recurring themes, a type of nature versus technology setup, man-made versus natural Pokemon, pollution, bending nature to your will, genetic modification, Team Rockets and ethical research, and so on and so on. So, a genetically lab-engineered, extremely powerful Pokémon as the last hidden secret you unlock after the final tournament fits in perfectly with these themes. Mewtwo served as the final challenge in the post-game narrative payoff for the destroyed Cinnabar Labs logs, a concrete example of human experimentation within the Pokémon world and its consequences. But notably, if you think of it from a writing perspective, the lore doesn't actually require Mew to exist as the thing you can catch. Why would there be a Mewtwo if there wasn't always a Mew? Because, thematically, the result of human interference is more important. A lab-engineered, weaponized creature cloned from ancient DNA is a neat narrative payoff. The journals in a burnt-down building tell you everything you need to know. Scientists found something rare and powerful, they extracted its DNA, they built something terrible with it. The story does work without the thing they cloned Mewtwo from. It's still given a name so that we can have the incredibly clever Mew and Mewtwo, but it has narratively fulfilled its purpose, which means that Mew as a designed, catchable Pokémon might genuinely have come after Mewtwo conceptually. The lore had a placeholder to be filled, an ancient, undefined ancestor, and Mew, slipped into code at the last minute, retroactively became that placeholder. The legend grew around the gap that was already there. Well, and then the games became incredibly successful and popular, and then the manga and anime happened, and they even put Mew in the first issue of the manga and the anime opening, and it became the star of the first movie, and at that point it was just an established thing in canon. And here's where the story becomes kind of boring, at least lore-wise. Here was this creature that existed outside the normal rules of the game world, and now it's just a character. So why is it that if it is a character and I see it in the first movie and in the anime that I cannot have it in my own game? I want the Mew. So here's something to think about for a second. You're a kid playing a video game. You don't really know much about game development, but you have the rough idea that it's hard work. That someone had to sit down and make every single thing you can see on a screen. Someone drew that, coded that, put it in there with purpose. Why would you spend time and money on something that nobody can ever see? Now imagine that you, or someone's uncle at Nintendo, lets you in a little trick that lets you go out of bounds to an area that normally nobody can see. And there's a freaking truck. Oh yeah, because we saved mid-step, the game thought, remember that we look in this direction, but whenever you start the game from saving, you look down automatically. So we just serve into the man. And that's how you can bypass him and get back on the ship. As I said, it's the only truck like this in the whole game. Let me clarify, it's the only one in the game, it's not a reused asset, and it does literally nothing. A truck on a dock, in what is probably the loading zone of a ship. A zone you pass through exactly once, positioned so that you cannot even see it during normal gameplay. Like, that is genuinely strange that it still kind of blows my mind, to be honest. Actually, the more I know about game development and the strict limitations on memory space for these games, the less sense the freaking truck makes. I'm not saying this is anything more than a forgotten asset placed somewhere where it kind of makes sense narratively. But I'm saying that back in 1999, when someone told me there was a strange truck with a Mew under it, and I wouldn't believe it, but I still checked, and there was actually a truck there that was nowhere else in the game. Well, I don't know what I'm saying exactly, but if you want to make me believe a lie, putting in a verifiable half-truth is a very good first step. The rumor didn't come from nowhere, it came from this. Alright, so we established that Mew is real, mentioned in the game, and confirmed to at least exist like in the Pokémon universe. And we have the somewhat frustrating, Mew is completely unobtainable to you specifically, how dare you not live in Japan or in any major city. The truck kind of came out of nowhere, to be honest, but it gave the myth some detail to stick to. It's just hidden enough, and definitely strange enough, to be the perfect thing for a curious and probably really bored child's mind to invent rumors and legends about. I don't think people actually invented any story reasons why there was a truck and why Mew would be in the truck. It was just sitting at the right place at the right time. So let's zoom out for a second. Because the truck alone doesn't explain why the myth spread the way it did, or why it stuck around for as long as it did. For a lot of kids in the late 90s, Pokémon Red and Green, or Red and Blue in the West, was the first genuinely open world they'd ever explored. Not just open world game in a technical sense. What I mean is, it was the very first time many of us had been handed a space and told, go find things. There's more here than we're going to show you. Go explore. And kids did what kids do with spaces like these. They looked in every corner, talked to every NPC. They tried using every item or HM move in every location, because the game, and the franchise as a whole, had trained him to believe that secrets existed. And I mean, it was right. There were secrets. The game rewarded obsessive exploration constantly, with many hidden items or low encounter chance Pokemon. So the culture around the games was already one of collective discovery. Trading information was as important as trading Pokemon. The playground economy, if you want to call it that, ran on tips and secrets, and trading was ingrained in the very concept. Plus, the franchise kept dropping hints that there was more to explore. The anime premiered and put this silly bird in the first episode, and waited another 2 years in real life time to actually introduce it properly. The message, consciously chosen or not, was that there are things in this game that you don't know about yet, so keep looking, keep playing. The marketing leaned on 150 as the number, but the text always implied that there would be more, and children noticed. The debunkings and magazine coverage in general are probably the most interesting parts of my research in this project.
The person who took the screenshots just... yeah.
I am 100% sure that as a child I had a German gaming magazine that described the Mew myth and where to find it under the truck, but I could not find it. So I went on the internet and looked at least 50 to 100 different gaming magazines in all languages from 96 to 99 and 2000, and I did not find anything. But to be fair, ironically, I think these magazines insisting that the rumors are false, while also printing the same rumors, kind of helped spread them. Because what if the method actually works, but only after you level your Pikachu to level 100? Have you tried it? No. Then how do you know for sure?
They have a question section, and they're talking about the rumors around Mew. The person writing in explains that he read on the internet that first you have to catch 32 Rattatas, then 10 Pikachu, and then you have to trade them back and forth 10 times. Now you give the Rattatas to Ash's mother, and so on and so forth. And I just like how elaborate they get, because you assume that nobody will actually do that, but people still wonder. But yeah, the magazine replies that this is nonsense, but they also confirm that a lot of people are writing in with similar stories that they heard on the internet or on the playground.
What the magazines show us is how big these rumors were. You only publish a debunking if the belief is widespread enough to be worth debunking, only if you get so many fan letters that it's worth responding to them. These corrections are, paradoxically, the best evidence we have that these myths were genuinely alive. The magazines were trying to kill something that clearly already had been in circulation for a while. And what I found the most interesting was that it's not just in one region or country. I looked through so many magazines and so many mentioned new myths. So if you wonder what the perfect condition is to grow a piece of almost folklore, this is what it looks like. A real puzzle piece missing, a real object to anchor the story to, a culture already primed for collective discovery, official media confirming that there's something real about the mystery without making it accessible, and a generation of children with Game Boys, too much time, and no Wikipedia. The Pokémon franchise didn't invent the Mew Truck myth, but it built every single condition required for something exactly like that to happen. Whether that was intentional or not almost doesn't matter.
I just took these one. I think they're from a Finnish magazine. I just like the drawings. Like, he's angry. But these are angry. Pidgey with a weirdly human face. Kiss me and I'll turn into Cerebi, the Poképrince. Oh yeah, one of my favorites. Let's go flippin' mental.
So here we are, case closed on a neat little story. We can draw a clean line from developer adds secret Pokemon at the last minute to children across multiple continents believe that there's something under a truck. We, as in people on the internet, now know basically everything about the games, the programming, the glitches, early builds, and so on. But then again, why is this Reddit thread from just a couple of years ago? Why do people still check the truck? Why is this person confidently telling me that in the Japanese version, there's actually Mew under the truck if you look? And why is there still so much time in the video left? Or let me ask a slightly different question. What does it say about us that we desperately needed something to be there? Well, let's continue and follow Pikachu's famous catchphrase, let's go flippin' mental.
Misty met Ash when he took her bike to get Pikachu to a hospital, but he got burned to a crisp by one of Pikachu's electrical bolts.
The craziest part is, the actual method to get a Mew in these games is way more insane than any truck story. So what we're gonna do is just go here, See this trainer? There's a trainer just below this. But as he's loading in, if we press the first frame the start button, no, it worked. So now he's trying to get to us, but I opened the menu. So if I just fly away, the little exclamation mark popped up, but he couldn't attack us. So now the game is in a weird in-between state. I cannot open the menu anymore, because depending on which trainer is going to load in or what Pokemon you last fight, something weird can happen. Let me show you. I saved this specific trainer. Let's just defeat him real quick. Okay, now we defeated a trainer that walked to us, so now we can open the start menu again and fly back. And if we enter the area where we fought the initial, or where we flew away from the initial trainer, that opened on its own. I did not do anything, so if I close it, and there we have it. Gaming's biggest mystery, and something everyone would have killed you for on the playground. Just right here. So here's something I've been thinking about a lot in the last couple of years. People believe a lot of stuff, like an impressive amount of stuff. Enter any Facebook comment section and you will find someone's aunt having really strong opinions about a topic that are definitely true, even or especially if they've been debunked at least 17 times. But let's not open that can of worms. Instead, let's talk about this. You've seen this one. Maybe you've seen the other famous ones. You most likely know that they are fake, but you still heard of them. Maybe you loved them as a kid. Maybe you still do. Maybe, against strict logic, you feel like there has to be something real that sparked the myth, right? Sound familiar? So let's try to answer the question that nobody has ever asked before. Is Mew a cryptid? Alright, so let's talk cryptids. You may not have heard the term before, but you definitely know what I'm talking about. The technical definition is something like an animal or creature whose existence is disputed or unsubstantiated, which is a very boring way of saying some type of being that has captured human imagination, but we don't really have any physical proof for it. You know, your Bigfoots, your Loch Ness Monsters, your Mothmans. Mothmen. Some of them are relatively new and only being established after the internet has become a thing, but some of them have been surprisingly long established. Also note that cryptids tend to be more on the side of zoological possibilities, and cryptozoologists spend a lot of time explaining why they physically and biologically make sense. That's why supernatural or magical beings and legends are usually not included here. Then again, ghosts and aliens sometimes are, so what do I know? But I want to talk about that initial definition a little bit. Because disputed and unsubstantiated carry with them the idea that the gap in the evidence could eventually be filled by just the next finding. And I'm not sure that's exactly what's going on here. Because look what happens when a cryptid gets actively debunked. The Loch Ness photograph, or surgeon's photograph, this one here, with what is supposed to look like a long neck, was taken in 1935, and then finally confirmed as a hoax in 1994 by the man who took it. But 60 years of mystery didn't just disappear overnight just because of some boring facts. The Loch Ness Monster is still out there, in popular culture, in tourism, in the feeling that the lake is somehow more interesting than other lakes. The debunking didn't kill it, it barely even dented the legend. I mean, we know that there's no monster in the lake, but if you're visiting Scotland anyway, you might as well go to the lake and, I don't know, just see it, right? So what is actually going on here? I think the honest answer is that culturally, cryptids are never really about evidence in the first place. And boy, am I making some powerful enemies if certain people see this. The debunking doesn't kill them because the belief was never founded on evidence in the first place. There's a reason Bigfoot lives in a dense forest and not a suburban park. Cryptids live exactly at the edge of what we can verify. They are just plausible enough to be not completely unbelievable, but also far enough away that you will definitely trigger more evidence-based people. What cryptids give us, and I think that's kind of true whether you believe in them or not, is permission to treat the world as not entirely figured out yet. To believe that there's still something out there to find. And I guess that's just something people really want quite badly. Badly enough to keep the myth alive long after the photograph is debunked. Or to keep checking other trucks they know are empty. Here's something I find fascinating. Have you noticed how there's less UFO and Bigfoot sightings not that everyone has pretty good cameras in their pockets at all time. There's a pattern here that I think is worth pointing out. When a new technology emerges, in the brief time when people don't fully understand the properties and limitations yet, something strange tends to come with it. Photography arrives in the Victorian era, and suddenly there are ghosts in pictures. A pale child standing just at the edge of the frame, weird ghostly shapes hovering in doorways. People knew photographs captured reality, but most people didn't know about double exposure, or how light behaves on a long shutter, or how easy it is to just fake and create intentional hoaxes. I think there's a crow outside. I'm feeding the crows now. So the very gap between what people thought photographs did and what they actually do became a haunted space. Couple that with a time where spiritualism and the belief in the supernatural was especially strong, and you have a tradition that is basically still around today. Video cameras become affordable, and suddenly we have shaky UFO footage and more sightings than ever before. And eventually we're back at video games. A kid in the 90s had no idea of how technology worked under the hood. The average player had no concept of hardware limitations. Would it make sense for a major developer to pour time and money into secret characters? Not really, but it's not like it's never been done before. It's not like there weren't any well-hidden secrets or Easter eggs at games. So how can you be sure? You had a frontier, and you didn't know what exactly was behind it or where it ended. We learn more, we examine the code, speedrunners map every single pixel, and the frontier closes. And some people would choose to believe anyway. If you're aware of the Pokemon games back then, you might have noticed that I've been kind of neglecting to talk about something very specific that was a really big deal back then. Well, let me tell you about MissingNo. MissingNo is not a secret Pokemon in the same sense as Mew is. There's the crows again. He's eating. I gave him peanuts. MissingNo is not a secret Pokemon in the same sense that Mew is. It's literally just a glitch. To put it extremely simplified, it's kind of a corrupted placeholder for when the game reads broken or missing game data by mistake. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but you get the gist. It's not that important. It looks wrong, it behaves wrong, it can duplicate items and will corrupt some of your game data. Crow. The contrast to Mew is, it has no lore, it has no backstory. No designer sat down and wrote a backstory for it. It is, by definition, nothing, a display error. And kids build mythologies around that thing. Because there was a clear gap. And it turns out that's just an open invitation to let us imagine whatever we want. Someone finds a glitch, someone tells someone else, and suddenly everyone has their own theory of what's going on. It lives on Cinnabar Island for a reason. It's what happens when a Pokemon gets deleted. It's like an angry spirit. I mean, none of that is true. We established that. But it's spread anyway. So we can see something about both video game legends and cryptids. They are not spread because people are convinced by truth. They are spread because sharing them is kind of the point. You have the grain of truth to point to, and it's just really engaging and just fun to make up theories. And the theories did just spread through all the playgrounds, all the lunch tables, all the school buses. Someone told you, you told someone else, and the telling itself was the social act that you wanted to do. Even if you didn't really believe, it was still a fun story. It turned a game you were playing alone on your Game Boy into a collective experience. Not to move into too dangerous territory, but I think a lot of online and offline bubbles work exactly the same. Blurry photographs and half-baked ideas get passed around, not because they're convincing or especially well thought out, but because sharing them is what makes you a community. Pokémon was, and is, from its first concept, a game about trading creatures and sharing information. You literally need other people to finish the game, or 2 Game Boys and 2 games if you are rich. Things like the Mew myth fit perfectly into that setup. It gave us something to research together, and that, I think, is why the debunking never fully worked. You can correct a fact with proof, but you cannot correct the commitment to a community. So here's the thing nobody ever tells you about solving a mystery. It feels like a loss. When the Loch Ness photograph was officially confirmed as a hoax, the Loch didn't gain anything from that. When speedrunners mapped every byte of the Pokemon games, or when the wikis filled every entry, the game didn't get any richer from that. There's something about not knowing for sure if and when your starter Pokemon will evolve that is just much more engaging than knowing the exact amount of EXP you need. I think what happens with a lot of fun theories and mysteries is that once you understand what's going on and you've looked under the hood, the mystery kind of collapses in taxonomy. Sure, you are closer to the truth and to filling out every little cell in your spreadsheet, but is that more fun? When the point of the game is filling out a spreadsheet, a finished spreadsheet is kind of boring. On a larger scale, a world that contains mystery is just more exciting. And honestly, I think this is one of the more central anxieties of living in the information age. I mean, it's great that you can just Google or ask an AI or look up stats in a wiki, but I mean, we built the tools to answer almost any questions within seconds, and I'm not saying that it is not great and useful. But culturally and in terms of the human experience, I think we just lost something major. When the map is already complete, exploration is just not that interesting. And we do see pushbacks against that, even if not always in the most healthy ways. Let's put it like that. Believing in cryptids in part means that you refuse to let the map be finished. We always invented the creatures we need, be it sea monsters on maps, ghosts, or hidden Pokémon, to keep the mystery alive. So to close it all out, the truck was never really about Mew. It was about needing the game to have one more secret in it. The one thing that the designers hadn't told you. And Mew, and whatever the real backstory of its inclusion in the game is, just fulfilled the need. Because we really want there to be more. A designer left a gap, and we did the rest. So if you take away anything from this video, remember that sometimes there's just nothing under the truck, even if it feels like there really should be. But it can still be fun to check. Just be careful when someone's uncle who works at Nintendo really wants you to believe something on the internet, because they may be a Russian bot.
Each one is totally different from the other. And, are you ready for this? There are 150 of them.
And the Pokemon is creating a monster of a commotion.
Hey, if you're still there, thanks for watching. So YouTube loves engagement, and I'm still a relatively new channel, so if you like this, why not leave a like, and write in the comments what your favorite childhood playground myth is, or whatever thing you totally believed that turned out to be wrong, or you didn't believe. Anyway, if you like this topic, I have, like, my first video is on a similar topic about wilderness and the loss of wilderness in Pokemon. So you might like that, even though it's my literally first video, so it's a little bit more clunky, but why don't you go there and write in the comments that I improved so much over the last half year? That would be nice. Anyway, thank you for watching. I will keep you updated on the crows. Bye-bye.
Bulbasaur.